Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to a look back at this week's Talking Heads. On the programme, we spoke about the pay rise which was announced a week ago for government staff. Also, should vehicles on the Isle of Man have to undergo an M.O.T? Also, we looked at our new government and asked what do we expect from our new MHKs and our new Chief Minister. And with the tax return deadline looming, we spoke to the Treasury to get some hints and tips about how to fill in those forms.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
First, though, civil service and Whitley Council workers are to get a 2.2% pay rise after negotiations between the Public Sector Commission and the unions failed and were referred to independent binding arbitration. Government had budgeted 1%. The employees' side was seeking 4.4%. So the final award is something of a compromise, but it will put a severe strain on department budgets, who will have to find the 1.6 million difference from elsewhere. The announcement was made just 24 hours after last Thursday's general election, which raised some eyebrows. So will the award mean cuts to frontline services, or could jobs end up on the line? What do we think about that? Let's go down to our Ballasalla correspondent, Dave. Hello, Dave.
Hiya, Stuart.
Yeah, your view on this?
Well, I think that the government are very, very lucky that they've got away with it up to now. The MHKs have had pay rises. Civil servants had pay rises last year. The ordinary people who are working, like yourself and others, you haven't had pay rises for how long?
Well, the trouble with this is that when you listen to the officials talking about it, it's because there are mechanisms in place, aren't there, that almost guarantee that people have got a right to pay rises, and on a regular basis as well. And it's often sort of external sources that come up with these things. You know, the politicians say when they've been criticised in the past, oh, you've taken a pay rise, you've given yourself pay. Oh no, it wasn't us. There's an external body that decides what we should earn, and so it's nothing to do with us.
The thing is, Stuart, you haven't had a pay rise. You've got to make your money go that much further because you haven't had a pay rise.
Well, I'm a freelancer, so it doesn't apply to me. But
no, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
There's an awful lot of people out there who have worked and haven't had pay rises for 3, 4, 5 years.
Absolutely.
Now, you can't keep allowing the cost of living to go up. I mean, I don't know whether you heard yesterday, Dominic Delaney. They brought in the supplement for the pensions when the cost of living was 10% higher. Just as Dominic said, it's 15% higher, and now they've taken it off them. Yeah. I mean, you just cannot do that, Stuart.
Well, the worry is that the public sector seems to be better treated than the private sector, and that's what an awful lot of people think. Whether it's true or not, I really don't know.
Well, I don't either.
But it does seem that the public sector is almost, shielded from a lot of these problems on the basis that there are regular pay rises.
Stuart,
yeah.
I certainly think that you've got to look at pensions, the OAPs, who are on fixed incomes, who don't get a 2.2%, who people living in council houses who, again, their rent goes up by 3 or 4%. We've got no control over that. That's what we have to pay because that's what's been decided.
Yeah.
And so they've got to get back to trying to equal out the level so that people who are on fixed incomes, single-parent families, pensioners and such like, have got to have a pay rise to try and keep up with the cost of living.
Well, I wondered earlier on whether or not the new government can actually freeze public sector pay for a period of time. I don't know whether or not they've actually got the legal ability to do that or not is the problem. But maybe that's the answer, because we've heard that, years and years ago, public sector pay was worse than private sector pay, but the perks were better. It seems that now the perks are better and the pay is better as well in a lot of cases. I think there are some people who disagree with that, but that again is certainly the perception. So, if they were able to do it, should the new administration try and freeze public sector pay, do you think?
Well, I don't see how you can when you've got the cost of living going up every year.
Right.
That's the point. If you're going to turn around and say, right, Stu Peters is on £2
million a year.
£25,000 a year. Right, okay. So his cost of living's gone up this year by 15%. So then, well, hang on, we can't give him 15% pay rise. No, but that then comes out of his money. So that in actual fact, you're falling behind all the time. They've got to look at equaling it out so that if the cost of living goes up by 5%, then somebody's got to look at it and say, well, okay, pensions and, people getting paid, as you say, public sector, they've got to have 5%.
Yeah, but where's it coming from? Where's this money coming from? Because rising...
If they hadn't have squandered the money they had, and they hadn't have dipped in to the reserves, there might have been a bit more money there.
Okay, all right. It's a point of view, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you for calling, Dave. I hope more people give us a call today, talking about the fact that it's been announced, it was announced on Friday, that public sector pay is to be increased by 2.2%. That affects most government employees, I think manual workers and civil servants. What do we think about it? And backdated to April. So April, May, June, July, August, September. So backdated effectively for 6 months. That'll be a nice little bung in the October pay packet, I presume. Your comments on this. I see one of our new MHKs is already having a go at government staff over the new pay for government employees, as MHK pay is linked to civil service pay scales. Is she and all the other MHKs going to refuse this pay rise on principle or take it? Asks Alan. I don't know. I don't know whether or not you can actually. Could you refuse a pay rise like that? Or do the people who do the payroll just have an amount for MHK1 as a pay code or something? It automatically pays the right amount. I don't know. Alan Bell was on Manx Radio on election night talking of how government was open and transparent. Yes, okay, Alan, we believe you, says somebody slightly cynical for a Monday. Hi, Stu, would you prefer relative job security or a bigger salary, says David H. I think I would always prefer relative job security, but it is relative. And there isn't. I don't know that there is much job security these days. It used to be the case that you could be reasonably secure in a career. I don't know that that's the case anymore. So I don't know whether or not you'd be diddling yourself by going for job security rather than a pay rise. Most employees in the private sector have not had a pay increase for 6 years or so. The civil service should wake up. The party's over. You squeeze the island until it's almost bankrupt. Get real. The greed has to stop now. Right, let's go to the lines. I think we've got Alan waiting.
Oh, hello, Stu.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking my call. The statistic of an increase of 2.2% seems somewhat out of kilter with the economic situation, both in Britain and here in the island.
Okay.
It's been awarded by the Whitley Council, as I understand it, and to make that award, one wonders what the makeup of this council is. Are they living in the real economic world of October 2016? Because it seems a rather strange and very high award to
Well,
me.
it was decided by binding arbitration. The two sides couldn't agree. Government wanted to give 1%. Public sector unions wanted 4.4%. And the arbitrator decided on 2.2%, which is pretty much bang in the middle, isn't it?
Yes. The 4.4% attempt at increase seems completely out of order with the economic situation. When you think the bank rate is 0.25%, inflation is low, 4.4 is obviously just out of order, in my opinion. Now, the problem also, of course, is something that I touched on with you last time we spoke, which was about 3 months ago, because these pensions from the public sector are also, in my opinion, too high. At the last conversation, I offered to you the suggestion of £15,000 per annum per person, and on top of that, people were allowed, obviously, to have their old age pension, as it were, making in rough terms around about £22,000. Now, I think that's a reasonable amount of money, and at the time, a number of people came on and agreed with me and said perhaps even I should be First Minister. We'll forget about that. I think one person came on and disagreed with my suggestion of £15,000. Now, there's also the question on the civil service of people retiring at 50, policemen, firemen, etc. All this has to come out of the public purse. And from what we're told in the election last week was that the government has problems with the finances here in the Isle of Man. Now, I have thought for many years, and I still think, that we can allow people to go at 50 years of age. That's an option, and we live in a humanistic society that's what they wish to do. We'll let them go at 50. But I don't think they should be allowed to collect their pension.
Well, hang on a second. If they've been paying into a pension scheme, and I think in the case of the police and the fire service, for example, they pay a much higher contribution than other public sector workers, and it's predicated on the fact that you do 30 years service, I think. So wouldn't it be unfair to try and change the rules as far as that's concerned?
No, I don't think so, because the public purse can't stand this. And the first thing that these people do, having taken their retirement on their pension, is they go out, they're not satisfied with that, they go out and get a second job.
Yes.
Now, in my world, yes, policemen and all the other public sector workers can, if they wish, leave at 50, but they can't take their pension.
Okay.
They're not allowed to take their pension in my world until they are 65 years of age.
Yes.
Which used to be, over the last, for most of the years since 1945, has been generally accepted as the age of retirement, 65 years.
Sure, yeah.
But what has come in is this matter of retiring at 50, collecting their pension immediately, and then moving on to a second job.
Yes.
Now, I don't think that's fair. I think we have to look after everybody in society, and I think these people have been getting too good a deal.
Okay.
And there will be a reckoning. I mean, we in the island cannot go on and on and on in this sort of way. As I say, going back to the award of 2.2%, it's not the government's fault. They have to accept this arbitration. I agree with that. The union trying to say 4.4%, well, that is a ludicrous situation. They're way out of control.
All right.
And the government wanted 1.0%, as I understand it.
Yes.
And that might have been slightly low.
Well, they budgeted for that, apparently.
Yes. Well, you see, now things are going to have to be cut. This coming in at 2.2. It's not the government's fault. If these people in arbitration say that they have to pay 2.2%.
Well, and as John Shimmin said in that interview, there are likely to be redundancies on the back of this. So, you know.
Well, exactly. And I do we really want that? I don't think we do. I don't think we should be going down this line. I think we need to pull together and not have a section of society that seems to be out of kilter with the economy and out of kilter with the people on the Isle of Man.
All right.
So I'll leave you in peace.
All right. Thank you very much for your call, Alan. It's always nice talking to you, and thanks for getting in touch today. Garth phoned and he was bouncing off the walls, and he said he didn't dare go on air after listening to our last contributor because he's got 17 years in the job, and he says, if the last caller had spent any time in the police force or that kind of service, and he very much doubts that he has, he'd have a very different view about early retirement. Okay, well, that's the whole point of this programme, isn't it? It's different points of view and letting people express them. Rebecca was on as well. She's a care worker and says, it'd be lovely if they could afford to have some sort of a private pension, but can't. It'd be nice to know exactly who's getting the pay rise, and maybe those who earn over a certain amount refuse it, says Sharon. Unlikely, I would have thought. The last government paid to get rid of over half the DOI staff, then put the work out to contractors, but none of the managers, under-managers, managers of managers have gone, and there's more of them now than workers, so I hope the new government will get rid of them, so the saving that will be made there will cover the pay rise for what's left of the workforce. The worry about this kind of thing is that when economies have got to be made because of big pay rises or whatever, it's often the frontline staff who go, the people who are actually doing the job, and there is a concern that it's the people behind them who maybe ought to be looked at first rather than the people who are at the cutting edge. Civil servants were awarded a 2.2% pay rise because our pension contribution rose by 1% and CPI is currently at 1.2%. That equates to 2.2%. So effectively, we've not received a pay rise. It's only keeping up with the cost of living. Yeah, but I mean, the majority of people haven't even had that. So you have had a pay rise. The fact that it's you're not actually better off than you were a year ago doesn't matter. Most people are worse off. Please explain to me what the general public are going to do when there are no civil servants left and there's no staff left to resolve families, probate, award passports and driving licences, hand out people's dole money. Who are they then going to complain to? Are we expected to work for free? No. Expected to work for the going rate for the job, which a lot of people tell me, and I'm not taking sides in this. Oh no, a lot of people tell me that the going rate for a lot of jobs in the public sector is lower than people are earning. So I don't know. Stu, I've got no problem with the 2.2% pay award for public sector workers as long as there's no impact on frontline services and their pension fund is dealt with in a more realistic manner. Regards from Neil. Regard to pay rise announcement being held back to after the election, I think that if it had been announced before the election, the very same people would have been accusing the government for making the announcement to attempt to influence voters. That's a good point. A no-win situation given the timing of the decision by the arbitration panel. That's a good point, I suppose, yeah. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The tail is wagging the dog. This is from Bert in Port St Mary. It's a disgrace. I want one of the new MHKs to stand up and put these civil servants in order. Right. The arbitrators have the power to set expenditure, then they must also have the responsibility to set where the extra money comes from, such as increased taxes. Okay, Tynwald has the legal powers to freeze public sector pay regardless of any agreements that government makes with unions, says James. Is that true? Right, I didn't know that, but thanks for that, James.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
More of your comments on this 2.2% pay rise for public sector workers. Disgraceful, not the government pay rise, but secrecy surrounding making it public. John Shuman admitted that it held back announcing the pay rise till Friday after the election results. Says everything about the outgoing MHKs. How many were privy to this info yet would stand for re-election? Why keep it secret? Openness, Mr. Shuman. Good job that you're not an MHK. Retired. Fed up with old Tynwald. Good luck to all new Tynwald members. Get in there, make the island great again. And openness 1st of June. Okay. Openness 1st from June. Right, now I understand it. I thought it was a date we were looking forward to. You can thank Mr. Tier for getting us pensioners out of the triple lock system, so our pay rises are gone, and we're glad he's gone. Good riddance, says Derek. Stu, I mentioned a short while ago that the Manx Civil and Public Service are given an average £70 a week more than the private sector. So they clearly don't need a pay rise until their pay is under that of the rest of us out here in the real world, lose their utterly offensive sense of entitlement once they are protected at our expense. Once more, they're protected at our expense from economic reality, says Mark. I don't know if Mark's right or not. Honestly, I don't. But that is certainly the perception of an awful lot of people who work in the private sector. Now, grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. We know that. But there is this perception that the public sector is much better looked after than the private sector, both in terms of cash and conditions, salaries, pensions, perks and all the rest of it. In 2014, the civil servants received a pay rise costing £2.5 million paid out of Treasury. September 2016, it cost a further £2.95 million out of Treasury. Adding these 2 years together, it cost almost £5.5 million out of Treasury every year. Had they taken a pay freeze, it would have been enough money to fund 577 new pensioners, a state pension of 180 quid a week for life. This money was taken out of Treasury year in and out to fund it. We're often told that we're living longer and pensions will run out by 2042. This is money from the Treasury that could afford to pay for new state pensions. Pay rises for those higher ups are widening. The pay gap year in and year out is unjust. The pay rises awarded to civil servants are unjust, unfair at a time when they claim that difficult decisions will have to be taken in the next 5 years. They should have taken a pay freeze. OK. Stu, this announcement was clearly held back so as not to affect sitting members' re-election. Had it been public, I'm sure that many of us would have questioned them on it. No wonder under 52% of those eligible to vote bothered. Public trust of national politicians is at an all-time low. Agree that pay should be frozen to try and protect jobs, says Peter. Alan for president, fact. Is that from Frank? Police firemen retire at 50, then worm their way in as a consultant on a consultancy basis on another government job. Pure greed. All right, well, that's a point of view. I don't know that I subscribe to it. 2% pay rise at the top might be equivalent to 10% at the bottom. Shouldn't any pay rise be scaled? Paying less at the top means that we can pay more at the bottom. I agree with Alan, says Matty. I haven't had a pay rise for 9 years. No one should get a pension before 65. If you can't do your job, get a different one. Last pay rise, 2009. No taxpayer paying my pension. No sick pay, less holidays than the public sector. Work longer hours than the public sector. Longer working life than the public sector. And we're the people who make the money to pay for this. It's a complete joke. Hey boy, old Alan's partly correct about retirement. The earliest age is 55, not 50, but he's correct on the acts of sheer greed by coppers, firemen, but in particular teachers. 6-figure payouts, then back on supply or yet another advisor or assessor. Sheer greed, says Frank. Wasn't it Alan Bell who said we're all in this together and we'd have to be open and we'd be having an open and honest government? Now we're told the day after the election about this pay rise, which was decided weeks ago. Why, if we have an open and honest government, this should have been announced at that time. Was it kept secret to protect the outgoing MHKs from awkward questions from the electorate? Not as John Shimmin says about muddying the waters. Mr Shimmin also says civil servants have been particularly hard done to in recent years. That's a joke compared to what was done to pensioners over the last few years. They're the ones who have had to choose between eating and heating, not civil servants. And that from John. Thank you, John.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Today sees the dawn of a new era in Manx politics as 24 newly elected members of the House of Keys are sworn in, half of them new faces. We also received confirmation of who's going to put the name forward to stand as the island's next Chief Minister. If you've got any thoughts on the new House or on who could be a good Chief Minister, does it bother you that it could be people with no ministerial experience? In that we've got 12 new members, new to politics even, in the Isle of Man and on a national level at least, in the House of Keys this time. Have you got any concerns about this, or are you being like me about it? Your glass is half full and it's actually an exciting time for a new start. That's the way that I prefer to look at it. I've got some concerns about it, but I think that the new people are going to really work hard to do a good job and to deliver on their manifesto pledges. Got a couple of comments in already. Good morning, Stu. I think we should all keep a copy of our elected MHKs manifestos. This according to Maggie in Sulby. I've put mine in an envelope to be checked at a later date to see if they're honouring the pledges. Well, that's a good idea, actually, although it's probably going to be 5 years before you see them again. But yeah, hold them to account. I think that's a fine idea. We don't care who gets the job of Chief Minister as long as they have leadership qualities and can stop all this petty infighting, and someone modern, suggests somebody else. Mark says, despite the fact that Peter Carron is no longer an elected representative and with his very low level of debate, why does Manx Radio indulge him some kind of knowing sage like talking head for opinions on the new political landscape? Well, he's got 30 years in the House of Keys, so, I mean, that, if nothing else, qualifies him to be able to look at things from a historical viewpoint, I think, Mark. He simply continued his usual incoherent diatribe of words that add no more to the debate than those of the famous word mangler John Prescott in the Parliament across the water, when he was handed one of his self-named Smarties as Minister for Education. Of all things, he spat it out within 6 months because he couldn't handle the pressure. Chocolate in the Smartie won't have even melted by then, says Mark. Not a fan then, Mark? Come down off the fence. Stu, I do hope the women and new MHKs in Timor would behave like adults and not spend the time behaving like children in a playground, says Ros. Well, yes, I agree with you, Ros. I would think that our politicians actually behave much better than they do across, where you've got the party political system. And, if you watch Prime Minister's questions on the Beeb, that really is like a sixth form debate, isn't it? People braying from either side of the divide there. And I think that's far worse than what we've got. But yes, it would be nice, I suppose. Part of the problem, I'm sure, is that the whole feel of Tynwald and the House of Keys is very sort of school-like, isn't it? So, if you're going to sit people on hard benches and make them line up and make them say prayers before they start, they really are going to feel as though they're back at school. And maybe that has got something to do with the way that they behave. I don't know. Let's go to the lines. We've got Ken in Peel who wants to have a word about this. Hello, Ken.
Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I have mentioned this before, but I think everybody's forgetting that an MLC could become the chief minister. So it'd be pointless.
I don't know if they can actually.
They can, yes. It's only the president of Tynwald can't be the next chief minister.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's Tynwald, not the House of Keys. As you might gather, I'm against MLCs being any party government. You can sit there and say that's not a good idea, but to be party government. But perhaps we should elect the chief minister separately, just like they're doing in America at the moment.
Okay, but people say that would mean that it would be like a presidential election, and that person would have a huge mandate from the public that might make them sort of fairly invincible.
Well, yes, but then he's got to get it through, both houses, like in America, where Obama couldn't get his gun law through because it got blocked. You've got to have support, although he might have public support.
Yeah.
You've got to have political support.
Do you think that people who want to be chief minister should declare that before the election, or do you think that the current system's okay?
Well, yes, but of course, some people who might be, if it's an MLC, he won't be in the election.
Right.
So it's a bit of a half-cocked. Why they couldn't have done whatever his report was earlier.
Yeah.
Why they sort of just took the recommendations, like a lot of things in the last year. They just sort of battered it to the next.
Oh yeah.
Political thing, but I do wonder about how many votes do you have to get to be chief minister?
13, I think. I think it's a simple majority, but I stand to be. This is one of the questions I'm going to ask James Davis later on when he comes in to tell us about it.
Majority, I think there might be 2/3.
Right. Well,
which was the problem. Was it 8 years or 10 years ago when Brown came from nowhere who was elected without even...
Well, he was Speaker at the time, wasn't he?
Yes, so... Anyway, that's my idea, but close the loophole.
Yeah.
Don't let MLCs be anything to do with the running of the government.
All right, fair dues. Thank you for your call, Ken. And we've got a similar thought from Fran. He says, "Good afternoon, Stu. Personally, I don't think it should be a prerequisite for anyone standing to declare their intentions post-election with a view to whether or not they desire to become Chief Minister. Another point in this is, however, the position of MLCs. Are these unelected leeches strong, with no democratic mandate whatsoever, permitted to vote as to who should be Chief Minister? For what it's worth, I'd say Mrs B would be an excellent choice, but by inclusion of MLCs in the process, she'll find it very difficult to overcome the hostility of the establishment. The others will probably get the blessing of the farmers' mafia, which comprise the establishment I refer to." Thank you, Fran. Ministerial experience is not needed, just good people skills and business experience. Okay, well, I think that's been something that's been debated by a few people, I think, over the last week, hasn't it? Whether or not you do need to have that sort of background to be able to do it. In many areas of operation, many areas of life, it does help to have some experience, because if you get the top job, if you become Chief Minister, you've got no idea at all about what it's like to run a department, and you're the person who's taking overall control of all departments, if you like, then it might be, I don't know, I think some experience is maybe not a bad thing. Now, it might well be that you could get that as a member of a department rather than as a minister. I don't know. It's not what I think anyway that matters. It's what you think. So if you've got a point of view on this one, share it with us. Stu, I don't see any point in candidates putting it in the manifesto, as they may not be elected to the House or even get the job if they are. Regards from Brian G. Yeah, well, I think it was John Shimmin in the last election, was it 2011, who took a bit of a pasting at the polls. I think he still got in, obviously, but I think he got a bit of a bloody nose out of it because he'd said if he elected he was going to run for Chief Minister, and I think a lot of people thought that was probably a bit presumptuous, getting a bit ahead of himself. So I think that in Manx politics it's maybe unwise to say too early that you've got a desire to go for the top job. Times are a-changing. And whilst I like to think that I've assimilated with the Manx way of life over the last, best part of 20 years that I've lived here now, so I am resistant to change increasingly. I think that's part of getting older as well. I don't mind, that's for me. I don't like change for me, but I don't mind it for other people, and I think that it sometimes brings exciting times. For example, I'm working in the other studio today because I couldn't get mine to work properly. I had a bit of a technical hitch. So I'm using the other studio. And I don't like the fact that the sea's on the other side today. I feel very odd about the whole thing. But the times are a-changing, certainly as far as the Isle of Man is concerned. We've got a completely new administration coming in, pretty much completely new. And it's certainly going to have a very different feel, I would suggest, than the last one. And politics generally around the British Isles are changing with Brexit and moving out of Europe and things like that. Do you think that this could be the start of something good? Or do you think it's a slippery slope to awful times ahead? Everybody says that the next 5 years are going to be very important for politicians in the Isle of Man. That was why it was so important that we elected good ones. Andrews sent me an email. He says that given that we have a man with zero political experience in the running for the most powerful position on earth, US President, not Isle of Man Chief Minister, in case you were wondering, I think the Isle of Man should be able to get away with it as long as the candidates have a decent level of leadership, people skills and decent levels of knowledge. Whatever happens, we do live in interesting times, whether we want to or not. Thank you, Andrew. Yes, that is a concern. I didn't mention Donald Trump, did I? The pundits seem to be suggesting that Hillary Clinton came out better in the televised debate, was it last night? But let's face it, there is a pretty good chance that Donald Trump might be the next president. Now, I'm kept sane by the belief that there's a big difference between what you say when you're on the campaign trail to get votes and what you do once you're actually elected. And I think that a lot of politicians start off with big ideas about I'm going to change this, going to change that, build a big wall here or whatever. But I think that once actually elected, I think that the people who are actually running the country might have very different views about things and might moderate a lot of what the Donald wants to do. I don't know. Stu, I've got no opinion on your topic today. However, you say that times they are changing. Can you play the track with the title Times They Are Changing? Can't remember the artist, your pal Kev. I think it was Bob Dylan, wasn't it? Worried, not excited. And that's from Rusty's dad, who cites lack of experience as the problem about it. Worried. Okay. No, I think I'm quite enthusiastic about it. I think it could be interesting times ahead. All that we need are people who've got the best interests of the Isle of Man at heart, I think, who've got a conscience about things and deal with things in an honourable way. So if we've got that in this new House of Keys, then I think that things will probably work out pretty well. There is a concern that I have heard that maybe it gives the civil servants a bit more power than they used to, because we've got a lot of new people in the House of Keys, and we will have probably ministers for the first time, people who've been made ministers for the first time soon, who might not have much experience about how things work. So that kind of puts the power in the hands of the civil servants. Certainly for a while. Or does it? I don't know.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets. with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
The Roads Policing Unit stopped over a dozen drivers for misusing their lights one night last week. Each person in turn stated that they couldn't remember the last time that they'd had the cars checked. Do you think that some sort of an annual M.O.T. test would be a better idea? It's something we've talked about before on the programme. I think generally people are against the idea of following the UK in terms of having annual tests, although a lot of people do think that, you can buy a car in the Isle of Man, drive it around for 10 years and never check anything on it or have anything checked on it. And so this is maybe one of the reasons that we've got so many one-eyed monsters on the island, or cars with bald tyres or whatever. And it's all very well being prescriptive and saying, all you need to do is to do a weekly check. And I'd like to think that I'm a responsible motorist. Do I do a weekly check? Probably not. I mean, things like tyres, generally you can tell if you've got, obviously if you've got a flat tyre you can tell, but if you've got a slow puncture you can usually tell. And that's the time, I had one car that was constantly leaking air, so I was always at the petrol station checking the tyre pressures and things. But the car I've got now has got run flat tyres. I'd probably not even notice if it went completely flat, to be honest. Bulbs, modern cars usually have a bulb out telltale, which is a reasonably new innovation. Very good idea as well. So if one of your bulbs blows on the car, you'll get a warning light on the dash. My older car doesn't do that, and I must admit that it does get through headlamp bulbs fairly quickly. I think it's because that car's got pop-up headlights, and when the headlights go down, if it's all a bit damp in the recess, and it can get a bit flooded in there at times if it gets blocked with leaves and things, then, you're effectively dunking a halogen bulb in cold, dirty water, which doesn't do them any good. So it does get through quite a lot of headlights, but you know instantly that one of your headlights is out and hopefully do something about it. But what do you think about some sort of a test? Would you welcome that, or would you think that it was the draconian hand of authority again, trying to extract money from genuine motorists who do look after the cars? Let's go to the lines. We've got David on. Hello, David.
Hello.
Yeah.
Well, I've been driving along the road, and sometimes you have a car, and only the passenger headlight is working.
Yes.
And what happens if a motorbike overtakes me? He thinks there's another motorbike coming the other way, and he ends up in the front of the car.
That's the danger of it, absolutely.
So it's only a matter of time before somebody gets killed, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the good things about most modern cars now, in that they've got a warning light comes on the dashboard to tell you that a bulb's blown. But, but older cars don't have that.
Old.
Yeah, a lot of cars don't have that.
That's
why the cops get... Sorry, go on.
What do you think of my opinion?
No, it's not an opinion. You state in fact.
Yeah.
If the headlight bulb is out and you've got anybody overtaking,
especially the driver's side headlight,
absolutely
is dangerous.
Yeah, completely dangerous.
So all the one-eyed monsters, as you call them, it wouldn't do any harm to pull them in for a start off, would it?
Well, I think that's what the cops have been doing, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think they're doing a good job.
But do you think, David, that they ought to be sort of let off with a warning and told to sort it out, or do you think that people should be fined more for things like that?
Well, if they've only got one light and it's the passenger side light that's on and no headlight on the driver's side, I think they should be booked for that.
Right, and fined maybe?
Yeah.
Points on the licence?
Well, I'm not saying. I've been fined in the past for speeding, you see.
Ah, yes, haven't we all? All right, thank you very much for calling in. That was David. If you've got a point of view about this, we've talked about it before on the programme, and I think a lot of people were against the idea of slavishly following the UK by having an M.O.T. test. And the point's been made, quite legitimately, that the M.O.T. test is no guarantee that a vehicle is roadworthy, except at the actual point that you're given the ticket, and that it's a system that's open to abuse in the UK as well. In that all sorts of death traps are out on the roads that have got valid MOTs for them. So I don't know what you think about that. I think, for what it's worth, I think that probably either an annual or a biannual test at least would maybe get rid of the worst cars on the road. And there are some wrecks driving around there's some gorgeous cars as well, don't get me wrong. And a lot of people have got older vehicles that they're very proud of and they look after meticulously. But there are a lot of old wrecks that really should be taken off the road. The cops can do that on these spot checks if they find them. But I expect a lot of them are still on the roads. What do you think? Would an MOT test maybe stop that? And we've got Fenella on the line. Hello, Fenella.
Hello.
Yeah.
My sister, she she lives away.
Yeah.
She'd had 3, I think, M.O.T. tests on her car each year, and she said, "How are the brakes? Are they all right?" Every time, and the fellows said, "Oh, they're fine. They'll do you a good while yet."
Yeah.
Anyway, she went to a different garage, and she said, "Can you look at the brakes?" When she came back, he said, "I've done your brakes." He said they were in a very dangerous condition. You were very lucky that you didn't have to have an emergency stop.
Do you know what? And I don't know, Fenella. Do you know what? I believe the MOT test stations are not the garage. The garage are there to make profit. And the number of time that people have taken a ride by garages because they'll take the car in for its annual maintenance or whatever, and they know that the car's in good condition, but, you know, they'll get the sucking in of the teeth, and it's like, "Oh, no, I'm sorry, but we need to put new discs on all round and new brake pads, and that's going to cost you £400 or whatever."
Yes, but they were. She showed them to her.
Well,
they were worn down.
Presuming that they were off her car and not off another one.
Well, she thinks they were. She said they didn't overcharge her. In fact, she said they were less. They charged less.
Well, it might have been one of the honest garages, but I mean that's what MOT stations are there for, is to check on things like that, and anything to do with safety, they'd condemn it.
Having it done every year.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay, well, at least it was sorted out in the long term. That's the important thing. Thank you for your call. Let's go to line 4, and we've got Howard on. Hello, Howard.
Hi, Stu.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm right, wrong, or otherwise, but I think I read somewhere a little while ago that in the UK they're now going to make part of the driving test an ability to check your basic needs of a car, tyres, lights, etc.
Oh, sort of a practical thing, yeah.
Yeah, practical. How capable you are of it, and that's going to be built into the test. Because essentially you're taught to pass a test.
Yes, of course.
To drive.
Oh, it's incredible how many people wouldn't know how to change a tyre, for example.
Oh, that's a racing, certainly, and it's going to get worse now because of these damn blow-up things.
Yeah.
You know, they won't even know where a spare tyre is on lots of cars.
The number of people who phone the emergency services in the UK, the RAC, AAA, Green Flag or whatever, I've got a puncture, can you come and change my tyre? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And another thing there, I'm driving on the island here, the number of cars that are going around with deflated tyres, not flat, but just deflated, in other words, under pressure.
Yes.
Not only are they burning more fuel in the long term, but the stability of the vehicle is, it's
questionable.
All up to shoot.
Yeah,
and if you get 4 or 5 people in it and you decide to go from here to Ramsey and you put your foot down, it's a ride, a rockabilly, and it's dangerous.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right.
I'm guilty myself. I'm going to have to go and get a new light bulb from the tail lights. But one of the things that I never heard Sergeant Flint saying, or Inspector Flint, when you're reversing up to something, you can see your brake lights, you can put your lights on. If you're saying a shop window or something like that, you can have a look without getting out of the car.
Yes, you can.
What's working and what's not working.
And you can put your hazard warning lights on and walk around the car and check all the indicator bulbs.
That's right, yeah. Simple things like that, but the number of people who get into a car, buy a car, and apart from putting petrol in, that they haven't a clue.
Well, I think it's mainly, Howard, because cars are now sort of consumer items, aren't they? When I was a kid growing up, I mean, a regular job, at least once a month probably, was helping my dad do the maintenance on the car. He had an old Morris, well, he had a new Morris Oxford in the 60s, but, and, I'd be sent underneath it with a grease gun because, it was part of the maintenance he had to do, was to grease the suspension joints and things like that.
Well, today, there's nothing like that.
Nowadays it's plug and play.
You can't even work on nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
They just replace a new component part and that's it, like for like.
Well, and the other thing is that screen wash bottles, for example, and Inspector Flint mentioned that, I think, screen wash bottles used to hold something like a pint of liquid, and so after a week of heavy use, it'd be empty. The one on my little daily driver, I think I've refilled it once in a year. I mean, it's a huge thing.
I've got a Qashqai.
Yeah.
And
probably about 2 gallons of screen wash fluid in it,
But that again is do people realise? I'm not sure about the legality on the island here, but in the UK that is a points on the licence job. That.
And so it should be as well, if you can't see through your windscreen because you've got no liquid in it, Yeah,
and well, as I say, with the driving test, it could be introduced here on the island. I don't know whether it is, it isn't, but the basic maintenance, just the ability to know what you're doing, walking around a car and seeing what things do, that should be part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Good stuff. Thank you very much, Howard. And, what did I say? Something in a similar vein about teaching kids to be able to, not everything about life lessons is academic, and teaching kids how to make food and stuff like that, or grow things ought to be important. Stu, it's terrible on the Isle of Man. When you're brought up in the UK, you know to keep your car checked as regards lights, etc. On the Isle of Man, there's slack to see people with lights out regularly. Many criminals are caught through police stopping them on minor offences when they go through their cars. I was watching that Police Interceptors programme last night. I'm going to have to stop doing that. I was yelling at the screen. You've got people that are doing these madly dangerous car chases around the northeast, chasing along 80 miles an hour, wrong side of the road and all the rest of it, causing accidents, then run in when they stop the car and junk it into a wall or something and go and run off. And they get a police caution for it. Just don't understand that sort of thing at all. Let's go back to the lines. We've got John on. Hello, John.
Hi, Stu. Just something that nobody really has hit on. There must be an awful lot of cars running around now, not old cars necessarily, with suspension problems. Now, I've just had to spend a considerable amount of money on suspension, anti-roll bar, etc., etc. And it's all because of the state of the roads. I mean, I hate to remember how many cars I've owned in my life, but I've never really had suspension problems.
Okay.
But this one, not done a big mileage, but the suspension needed quite a bit of replacement, and it's all because of the state of the road.
Sure.
I mean, if you hit a pothole in the dark, you can literally break a spring.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody seems to cotton on to this, and I think there's a lot of... I mean, okay, I could hear noises in the front suspension for considerable time, and I knew there was something needed doing.
Yes.
And it was getting worse. But a lot of people are not sort of tuned into just a little rattle here and a little rattle there. They don't bother about
mechanical empathy. Yeah, a few people seem to have it.
It's called car sympathy. I mean, there's certain parts of like Douglas Promenade, you don't go fast along there anyway. I mean, nobody in any sense would exceed the 30-mile speed limit because you're knocking hell out of the suspension.
I'll tell you what is a good service, John. The DOI have got this thing where you can report potholes and things like that. And I did that fairly recently because I was driving up Richmond Hill, heading south, and there was a car on the other side of the road overtaking where they shouldn't have been, but that's by the by. What it meant is that I needed to stay well into the left of the road. And as you get to the top of Richmond Hill there, before you drop down towards the Forge, I'd never noticed it before because I'd never been that close to the verge. But there was a couple of grid covers, and I think they must have sunken. And I hit these at 40-odd miles an hour, and I thought that my wheel was going to explode. I mean, it was such a hit.
Yeah, because you can damage a tyre, not only the suspension too.
Like I said, I thought it was going to break the wheel. It was that much of a hit. But, I went onto the DOI website and I downloaded this little app onto my phone, and you can report it and you can tell them, you can draw on the map where it is and what the problem is. Now, I don't know if it's been fixed or not because I've never driven that close to the curb again. But, they say, if you tell us about it and we can, we'll fix it. They can't do the promenade straight away, but, there are some things that they can do.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, if we could spend our time driving on the Slock, we'd all have no problems with it.
There are worse places to be if you've got a nice car, yeah.
Well, yeah, it is, but... it does get ridiculous now. I mean, there's just so many, not just potholes, but just worn-out roads that are knocking hell out of suspension.
I suspect they've got to prioritise, John, in that it would probably cost billions to resurface all the roads that really could do with resurfacing.
Left it too late.
Yeah.
They've left it too late now.
Yeah, it's when they had plenty of money they ought to have done it. Yeah.
You get to the point where it becomes that you can't cope.
Yeah. All right, some good points there from John. Thank you very much for calling. Let's have a look at some text and emails. They've started to come through now. We've done that one. This issue really gets to us drivers. You should know this. We need MOTs. Can't believe that this island hasn't cottoned on yet. with the high number of road deaths on our roads. I don't think we have a high number of road deaths on our roads outside of the TT. That's going to skew our annual figures in terms of road accidents, but I don't know that it's a bad place to be as a driver. I've just had a brake light replaced just about halfway between annual service dates. MOT tests are only once a year, so we'll not catch up with occasional failures. No, they won't. They're just another stealth tax. Not convinced by that, Jenny. If a vehicle's not fit to be on the road, then there's a separate law that covers it. OK, that from Jenny. I've made an amazing discovery and found a thing, something like a stick that sticks out from the side of the steering wheel. Guess what? You'll never believe this. When you move it up and down, it makes those blinky things at the front and back of the car light up. Do you think other cars might also have them? That's from John in Farm Hill. Yes, people sometimes are poor at indicating. Besides, loads of people don't use their indicators here to get them checked, says Kev. Another call for indicators. Absolutely agree to have an MOT test done here. The amount of cars that have defects is nuts.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
This is Talking Heads, and we're talking about vehicle security and safety. Do you do a weekly check of your bulbs and things on your car? Do you check the tyres, make sure that the pressures are all right? Do you check things like washer fluid? Or is it one of those things that when it needs to be done, you do it? So if you get a bit of a flat tyre, you know about it, you go in and at the same time you check it. And if you press the button and you don't get any water out of the washer jets, then that's the point at which you fill them up. We should all check our vehicles on a more regular basis. And that begs the question, do we need to have some sort of an MOT test in the Isle of Man so that there is at least an annual inspection of vehicles? Because I suspect that an awful lot of cars don't even get that. Let's go to the lines. We've got Chris on. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Stuart.
Yeah.
Being a professional mechanic,
yes,
and I've worked for many years for a reputable coach company on the Isle of Man. And it's not the ones that are painted red either. People don't realise, like coaches and buses and stuff, have to have an annual MOT.
Right.
Now, it used to take us, 2 mechanics, a full fortnight to get a coach ready for its annual test.
Wow.
Yeah, by the time you strip out all the brakes, and of course it's all heavy, big, and horrible.
Yeah, sure.
But what people don't realise is, before we used to take a coach up for the test, we'd check all the lights in the morning.
Yes.
But if you've got one brake light out, the power surge, by the time you get to the test centre, can blow its counterpart on the other side.
Of course, yeah.
So we used to go to the test centre with a full set of bulbs.
Yes, spares just in case.
Just in case.
Good thinking.
Coaches are 24 volt,
yeah,
and you just don't get them at your local filling station.
Yes, yeah.
And I agree with one of your previous callers. The number of people driving modern cars, and I thought it was construction in use regulation that they should have indicators.
Right.
But obviously the people sat behind the idiot wheel don't know how to use them.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people are professional drivers because they've got lights on the roof.
Right, okay, fair dues. Well, we'll not name any names, but thank you very much for your comments, Chris. I didn't realise that public service vehicles like that have to be tested annually, so there you go, you learn something new every day. Michael at Welbeck says, both the garages that service my car and my wife's check all the lights, tyres, exhaust, etc., so surely the things that are checked on the MOT are done by most reputable mechanics anyway. Yeah, you're right, Michael, but I suspect that a lot of people don't have regular annual services like that. Maybe you're supposed to, and I don't know. But on my little daily run around, it's got one of those service indicators. And on the basis that I only do about 3,000 miles a year, and I think when I bought the car a year ago, it had 6,000 miles left before the next service was due. So you tend to service them when they need doing rather than on an annual basis. Yeah, good point though. Stu, before I came to the island, I know several places places where I could have bought an MOT without taking the car near the places. Did you, Brian? I wouldn't dream of using such a fiddle, but many must be tempted. A car's a dangerous thing if not maintained properly. Yep, you're right. I think the standard of cars on our island is actually quite high compared to the UK, says somebody else. Right. Not convinced, but OK, if that's the way that you feel about it, then it is a valid point of view, of course.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
I'm a big, big girl in a big, big world. It's not a big, big thing if you leave me, but I do feel that I do will miss you much, miss you much. I'm a big, big girl in a big, big world. It's not a big, big thing if you leave me, but I do feel I will miss you much, miss you much.
Amelia, Big Big World. She just sounds so vulnerable in that. You just want to give her a big hug and buy her a bowl of soup or something like that. Let's go to the lines. We've got Phil on, probably our last comment about this. Hello, Phil.
Hi. In my younger days, I worked for the Isle of Man Highway and Transport Board.
Oh, yeah.
A board, so it takes me back a long time. And we had the vehicle transport, the vehicle centre out at M.O.T, and driving tests as well. They did, of course.
Still do.
And any vehicle that came into the Isle of Man, second-hand vehicle, had to go through a test at our depot.
It still does if it's over 3 years old.
And most of them were pretty bad. They never could trust the garages who did the tests to be honest and truthful with the state of the vehicle.
Yeah. Oh, I think that the M.O.T test system is deeply flawed, but it's whether or not, even so, it's better than people never having any sort of a test.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's the thought. OK, Phil, thank you very much for your call.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.